Today on the bench we have a GE Super Bass. This is a Model 3-5875A. Probably one of the best solid state AM sideband 40 channel CB radios ever made. Has the dual Cybernet circuit board chassis. Extremely good receivers, just as good at transmitters, but one of the things that really made these radios shine was their exceptionally good receivers. They have really good transmit too, because this also has a built-in speech compressor, a little circuit board back here behind and below the meter here, little speech compressor module. Other nice little features this had was dual antenna, which on this radio does not work, which we'll get to in a minute. So a customer sent this one in to have it basically completely restored. He got this for, it was some insane price. Cheap, as in cheap. It wasn't exceedingly expensive, which these radios usually are. I think he paid like 25 or 50 bucks for it. I mean, that's crazy. And it works. Doesn't work fantastically, but it does work. It looks extremely nasty, but actually it's in really good condition. The covers, which obviously are already off, they're in nice shape. The faceplates actually, it should clean up close to mint. Like I said, it's just nasty now. It's got a lot of dirt on it. I have to remove the faceplate. I think I've shown how to do that before in videos. Take the faceplate off. You have to take the lens out, because unfortunately that was one of the kind of the sore spots for me with these radios is, and honestly it's not that bad, it's just over decades of use, heat cycles, air being drawn in and out of the radio, dirt gets inside of it. The problem is dirt gets in through these meter, because where the meters are here, there's a cutout in the black background. Dirt gets in there, and then it gets trapped in between the lens and the actual black part in there. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky getting these out. You got to take the faceplate off, unscrew the top plastic piece, pull it out, take some more screws out, then very gently get the lens extracted out of there. But yeah, it's just dirty. Like I say, really nice shape. There's so much dirt actually on these knobs. They're almost smooth. I mean, they've got grooves in them, but man, it's just, whew, yeah, serious need of some cleaning. But like I say, cosmetics wise though, at least as far as damage goes, man, they just don't come much nicer than this. So I think this should be a really nice looking radio. So initial inspection, everything seems to work okay, with the exception, I'm going to say it needs a relay for the antenna switch. Because if we turn it on, right now I have it hooked up to the communications test set, and I'm feeding in a minus 120 dBm signal, and it's weak. Now all the controls on this thing internally are just as nasty as the knobs on the outside, because I mean, yeah, the clarifier, if you put it into, if we can even hear anything on sideband, barely, because the receive sensitivity is kind of low. It needs to be completely gone through, but you touch the clarifier on sideband, forget it. It's just all over the map. The volumes, you can hear it cuts in and out, because it's just, all the controls are just filthy. But it is receiving, so that's a big plus. I haven't actually even keyed the microphone yet. And what do we have up there? I'm actually looking up at the spectrum display here. Get the camera leveled out. And we're doing 36.9 dBm, so we're doing more power than we should be. So the power has been turned up on this from the looks of it. It's doing over 4 watts, so that'll get turned back down. But if I switch, so that's on end, let me increase the signal level a little bit. So there you can hear. You can just hear how nasty. I mean, yeah, it just cuts out. It's just really dirty. But in any case, if I switch the cable over to antenna jack B, and then flip the switch over to B, there's nothing. And someone has actually painted the antenna jack B white. I kind of was wondering what the heck that was. I thought it was oxidation at first, and well, now I know it's paint. Somebody kind of highlighted it, the edge of it with white paint, I guess, to indicate that it doesn't work. So that's easily fixable, though. Well, I don't want to say easily, because it's actually a pain getting that little circuit board out, but reach up here. I have a few of those relays, so that's the relay that it takes right there. So I've got a few of those here. Picked up a case of those things, so I got two layers of them. So plenty of room. Matter of fact, I might as well just leave one of those out. I'm going to need it. Internally, it looks good, with the exception of there is some corrosion. There has been. Let me get the power cord unplugged here. Everything unhooked. Top side looks really nice. No signs. Doesn't really look like anything's ever been done up here. I won't know for sure until I get the all the screws taken out of the top board and get it lifted up to see if there's been any solder work. But just at a quick look, it looks pretty good. Ooh, well, I stand corrected. What the hell happened there? Well, I'm definitely going to have to give that a look-see. There's been some meltage or soldering going on on that jack. I don't know what the heck happened right there. It looks like maybe the wire broke off, and I guess they didn't have a new terminal to stick in here, so I'll have to check that out. But I hope that unplugs. I hope they didn't solder the blasted thing to the lower... I'm not going to even try. The camera's in the way. I need to release the lock tab. Oh, actually it just popped off. So yeah, I gotta fix that properly. Yeah, okay, it does come out, so that's good. It didn't get soldered down to the bottom pins, but yeah, other than that, that'll be an easy fix. That just needs a new terminal. Otherwise, looks good on the top side. Need to remove the corrosive glue. It's got, now luckily it hasn't gotten really bad. There's glue right there by that crystal, but yeah, it's not juicy anymore. It's starting to get hard, but it's not dark brown. Of course, there's going to be lots of glue around all the big capacitors back there. Otherwise, like I say, top looks nice. Let me push down, and in case you're not familiar with these, to take the faceplate off of these switches get in the way. I've shown this pretty much in every GE Super Bass video I've ever done, but I'll show it again just in case you haven't watched any of those. If you look in from the back side, from the clock and the switch panel here, on either side there's a little flipper lever. Pull those little flipper levers out, and then there's two little tabs here, and if you push down right there, it recesses the entire switch panel into the radio. Now you can take the faceplate off, and then when you're done, you can just, and it locks back in. So kind of an ingenious idea the way they did that. And I usually push that down anytime I'm going to flip the radio over. That way I'm not pushing on the switch. You know, the radio's not resting on the switches then. Be really careful with this because I really don't want to damage that really nice faceplate. That's the first thing I'll do once I turn the camera off, is I'll take all the knobs off, stick them in the ultrasonic cleaner, and pull the faceplate off and set it off to the side while I work on it. But the most common problem, I think I honestly have only ever seen maybe, and this is a big stretch, maybe 2 GE, and not just Super Basses. It could be the Super Mobiles. So, you know, they made this same circuit boards and a mobile chassis. There was a few other radios that used this chassis, but I think I've only ever seen maybe 2 radios that didn't have circuit board damage. It just, figure if you buy one of these, it's going to be damaged. That capacitor will have leaked. They all leak. And what's really weird is it's upside down, because the radio is upside down right now. So normally this capacitor is upside down with the leads facing upwards. The problem is it leaks electrolyte out that's corrosive, and it eats the traces off the board. You can see some of the videos of all the horrible, nasty damage because that stuff just spreads like the plague. And having to replace lots of traces. This one doesn't look too bad. Someone has already apparently scraped off, because that did not look like that originally. Somebody's been in here and scratched at it. You can see it's corroded over here, the electrolyte. And the problem is that electrolyte gets out. The traces underneath of here, it gets underneath of the overcoat on the copper, and it kind of progresses underneath of that silk screening, okay, the overcoat on those traces, and gets trapped underneath of it, and it just spreads and spreads. And you can see it's made it the whole way over here about to this diode. It doesn't look like it made it to the trace where it continues on past, but yeah, I'll have to you know, obviously have to take this cap off. It's going to get changed when I replace all the electrolytic caps, but yeah, take this diode out, and any components in the area, remove all of them, clean this off really good, make sure I get all of that electrolyte off the board, clean it off with a fiberglass brush, which, just reach in my shirt pocket here and grab one. I'll just take a quick look and see how bad these traces actually are. Yeah, they don't look too bad. Yeah, there's still lots of copper there, so they look good. So yeah, I'll just get that cleaned off really good, re-tin it with solder, and then I can put some overcoat over top of it to protect it. Other problem you'll find with these radios, and this is not specific to this chassis, any radio, early CB radio that has double-sided circuit boards like this, if you have intermittent problems, you know, you used your radio one day, it works fine. You come back tomorrow and it doesn't. And then you come back the day after that and it works fine again. Or you can be in the middle of using it. You know, when you turn it on, it works fine. And after it's been on for a while, you'll start to have problems. And they can be any kind of problem. Receive, transmit, audio problems. The top board, the one you previously saw, is a single-sided circuit board. This circuit board is obviously double-sided, has traces on the top and the bottom. And these early boards used in CB radios did not have through-plated holes, so they have these little pass-throughs. Zoom back in again. So they have these little pass-throughs, and yes, these cuts are actually factory. That was done at the factory. These were factory modifications, and there'll be a couple parts bodged on the bottom side of the board. But anyhow, these pass-throughs fail. And so just be aware of that. If you have intermittent problems like that, best thing to do, go over this circuit board really, really well. Usually these connections do not fail on the solder side. You know, so the other side of the circuit board, that's usually not where they fail. They usually fail on the component side of the board. I don't know why, that's from experience, that's where they usually all fail. And they can be a pain in the butt to trace sometimes. I'm just looking here and I can see there are some nasty looking ones. Trying to look around the camera. Some of these back here don't look too healthy. Yeah, there's some more. Where am I at in the camera view? Right there. You can see it looks like that one's kind of cracked out. But honestly, the best thing you can do for these, any of these pass-through connections, my suggestion is desolder it and resolder it with silver solder. Silver solder is a lot stronger than the solder that was used in these originally, so it'll just give it more mechanical, the strength, more mechanical strength. But yeah, they're all over this circuit board. They're just everywhere. But it's the probably next to that cap failing and leaking out electrolyte onto the board and causing circuit trace damage. The other thing, the most common problem you'll find is those pass-through connections. And usually if you fix them properly, the radio will last you the rest of your lifetime. Yes, it may fail again at some point in the future, but if you repair those properly one time, it'll usually last your lifetime. I mean, you got to remember how old this radio is to start with, and they've lasted this long, they start to have problems. But it's just something to be aware of with an older radio. So, and the relay I was talking about that needs to be replaced is right there. A little bit tricky getting these out. you can't unscrew this bracket right here. There's two steel brackets that come out through here, and even if you take off, there are two screws here to pull this out, but still the metal bracket wraps around the relay. So there's basically like a horseshoe bracket right here. It's got two screws that come in from the backside, one right there and one right there. But even once you get the board out, you still can't get the relay out because the bracket's in the way. So you have to desolder all the connections there that solder that bracket onto this board. Then you can desolder the terminals on the relay and get it pulled out. You're also going to have to desolder the antenna connection right here because it's just so short. That coax cable is so short. If you desolder this one, you can leave the two that go to the antenna jacks themselves. You can actually just leave those connected. And you can leave these two wires on there. You can get enough room to pull it up and out and work on it. But, so let me get to it. Actually, that's probably the first thing well, no, I want to take the faceplate off. Keep this mint faceplate in mint condition. So, but I shall return. Okay, so getting ready to take the relay off. Like I said, take the two screws out of the back. This is the bracket that goes around it. Even with the desoldering iron, it is best to still use desoldering braid. There's going to be the joint is still going to be sweated where it's attached there because these things fit really, really tight in the slots on this board. So come in there with some desoldering braid and clean it really, really good. Then I take a pair of duckbill pliers and kind of put the jaw on the back side of the board there and then kind of fold my hand around and press right on the tip of this to try and press it out because it's so easy to break these boards because they're such a tight fit. But once you get that out, and the main reason I wanted to show this was I just saw something I've never seen before. What the sample? What the heck was this thing? I've replaced a lot of these relays in these radios, and I've never seen one that said sample on it. So I just thought I'd show that. Yeah, just kind of interesting little side note. For some reason, the relay was a sample. Okay, so I'm still in the process of working on her. I've already recapped this bottom circuit board. I did have to do some circuit trace repair after I got the cap pulled off and pulled the leads out from a couple of those components and cleaned it off with a fiberglass brush. Yeah, it was maybe a quarter or less of the trace left in some places. But it was still, as far as how bad they can get, this one wasn't really that bad. Another place to keep an eye out on these radios, corrosion. Like I said, this one, the biggest problem is it's a double-sided board, and when that cap that's attached to those two terminals right there leaks on the other side, which is actually this one, you can see how nasty that thing is on the bottom, how corroded the terminals are. So yeah, it just oozes up, you know, against gravity, just surface tension draws it up, it gets onto the traces, and it just spreads like the plague. I mean, I'd be interested to know what amount of electrolyte actually comes up each of those leads and causes all that damage. It's got to be just a microscopic amount. That stuff, it's just, it's amazing how much damage that stuff can do over a long period of time. But there are some caps that leak on this top board. Now, the big advantage we have with this top board is it's a single-sided board, so only has solder traces on or copper traces on one side. But again, it can leak. The caps leak, and of course, the advantage they have here is the electrolyte can much more easily get onto the board because on the top board, the capacitors are mounted standing up. So all it has to do is run down the lead. It'll come down the lead and then ooze through and basically etch up through and around the circuit trace because it's on the other side of the board. And that has happened here. So if we look right there, where's my pointer at? We can see, getting the camera view here, how dark it is. There's a little halo around here. Well, that's where electrolyte from, of course I've zoomed in now. Actually, that's one of the small caps. It's not even a really big one. But yeah, you can see there's a bubble in the overcoat right there. And same thing, it's all out down to here. Now, when you're doing this, don't leave that. It's going to do the same thing that it did to this other circuit board. It's going to eat the copper traces off. Eventually it's going to cut those traces in half. They'll just completely corrode through. You really do honestly have to get brutal, you know, relatively speaking, with this stuff. Don't just figure you can wipe that off with a, you know, a chem wipe with a little bit of alcohol on it and you're going to be fine. You've got to get all of this crap off of here. So best thing to do is get yourself, you know, a little solder aid toolkits and whatnot. They usually come with some nice little scrapers, and that's what I'll usually start with, is one of these to, you know, kind of just break through. Man, this is hard trying to I'm half looking through the viewfinder. I don't think I can get the camera spun around here and down far enough. I'm not sure. Is that still in view? Where are we at? Yeah. Just have to move the radio over a little bit. Still in view there. Yeah. So I'll just come in here and now scratch some of this off. Yeah, this side doesn't look too bad, at least that one trace there. I'll clean this other trace that's corroded off. And I always want to go a little bit past that, you know, where it's obviously corroded, to make sure I get back into good, clean trace that's never had any of that gunk on there yet. There's one spot right there. And then I can come in with a more aggressive fiberglass brush. So I have two different basically hardnesses. I've got this style here, and I have the little soft fluffy brush one, and I also have the Rush erasers, which are about like these. These are very hard. If I pull that out of there, it's, you know, really hard little insert, but it's made up of fiberglass bristles. Now just be careful when you're using these things. Make damn sure you've got a vacuum cleaner. Trust me, the last thing you want are these little... Now if you're using one of these with the fluffy bristles, yeah, they're fine. You won't have a problem with these. These, on the other hand, these will jab into you, and you'll have a hard time getting out a fiberglass splinter. And these things are hard, and they're like little tiny miniature, almost microscopic hypodermic needles. You get one of those things in the bottom side of your arm or your elbow or something. So yeah, always make sure once you're done, vacuum clean it off, because I speak from experience when I say I've had those things embedded in my elbows and in my forearms and whatnot before, and it is not pleasant. Now these little brush inserts in this one don't last as long as, let's say, like in the fluffy brush, because these break off so easily because they're so hard. But they do a much better job of getting really hard corrosion off, like is what I'm trying to do right here. And actually I think this one will be fine. No trace repair needed at all. Now I can come in, vacuum that off. And now I can come in and clean it off really good. We're still in camera view. Yep, take a look here. Yep, looks good. So I'll then clean that off. Once I get the electrolytic capacitors out there, I'll clean it off again, because there's going to be some of that residue in the hole, these two holes here where that cap's been leaking. So I want to get that stuff out of there. I'll, you know, flush it out a little bit more, and then I'll overcoat these traces, and then I can install the new capacitor, and it'll be good. But yeah, like I said, it's just very important to get that stuff off of there, because eventually it will eat through these traces. Trust me, time and again I see these radios with traces that have been eaten through. So it's just a matter of time. It's not a if it's going to happen, it's just a matter of when is it going to happen. So I'll be back.
contact there. I won't tie you up any longer, but definitely good making the acquaintance, man. You got Mike over here, Mike in Kilo Echo. Okay, Mike, business. I hope I get this right. 451 out there in Wisconsin, sounding grand on the band. World Radio 79.
Okay, so I've got the radio pretty much done now, other than sticking the covers on it. The only thing I ran into, I may do a separate video on that. The clarifier has been unlocked on this radio, and I ran into a problem when I was doing the alignment. I couldn't get the lower sideband oscillator frequency high enough. I was like within 10 hertz. I mean, it was one of those, you'd turn and turn, and it was, I'd start to go back down. It's like, oh, you've got to be kidding. So I may do a separate little video on that, just because of the design of this radio. And it doesn't necessarily need to be because of a clarifier being unlocked. Just a crystal going out of tolerance over the decades could cause, you know, you to run out of adjustment. But I needed to change the value of a ceramic capacitor. The problem is, anytime you want to change any of the parts in this radio, yeah, there's two circuit boards. The solder side is, yeah, it's trapped in there. You can't, you got to disconnect all the plugs, take all the screws out, gently fold this board up, because remember, anytime you work on one of these things, you're taking a chance of wires snapping off. If you've never worked on one of these, or if you don't have a bench sample like I have, you know, I've got a good working one that if I ever need to, I just pop the cover off of it and look at. But all of these wires that come to the top of the radio here, they're attached through wire tie points, and every time you fold this board up, you stand a chance of breaking off one of those wires, and it does happen. They're solid wire because it's wire tie wire. So every time you fold these boards up and you're recapping or doing repairs, you stand a chance of stressing those things and just the wires just break off. So anything I can do to avoid having to pull a board like this, I will do. So I did a little thing, showed how to install a surface mount capacitor in place of the through-hole ceramic cap that was on this. Like I said, I'll probably do a separate little video as soon as I get done shooting this. So as you can see, it was receiving. It's a good working radio now, receives and transmits well. Transmit was, wow, just not out of a line. Well, yeah, actually it was distorted on AM. Modulation was cranked up the whole way. Sideband power, however, was just, yeah, it was just out of alignment. It wasn't real. I don't think it was so much a screwdriver job as it was just out of alignment. Everything had drifted out so far that sideband maximum power was like, and it was uneven between the upper and lower sideband. I think I had like 8 watts on upper sideband and something like 3 or 4 on lower sideband. Once I did the alignment, got the driver and bias voltages adjusted, everything returned back to the way it should be. Speech compression works well. Here, take a little bit out of view. Speech compression works well. And that actually now a lot of people ask about speech compression. Yes, you can use this on AM or sideband, but you'll usually, where most people use speech compression is in sideband. That's where you'll get the most benefit out of it. Think of compression. There's lots of different things you can do to your audio: expansion, compression. There's all kinds of filtering and whatnot. What compression does is it takes, because when you're talking, we'll just use my fingers. You've got lots of different frequencies, and like my fingers, they're all different lengths. Well, different peaks. Okay, so you know whatever this audio frequency might be is higher than, let's say, these two frequencies. One might be higher in frequency, might be a little bit lower in level though. Same thing with this one, and then this lower frequency here is even lower still. What speech compression does is it will help to even out the levels so they're a little bit more even. Instead of being, you know, grossly lopsided, it helps to flatten that out. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but it helps to level that out some, which in essence, especially when you're on sideband, because remember, there's no carrier on sideband, so however much audio power you have modulating will affect how much output power you have. So the more you can level that out, the more punch you're going to have on sideband. So it's noticeable on AM, but compression really shines when you use it on sideband. Really nice, these radios. That's one of the things that really makes these nice on sideband, is that it has the speech compression. And of course, they're really, really good receivers too. That's what GE Super Basses are known for. So yeah, otherwise really wasn't a lot of cleanup, especially the faceplate. I guess you remember how nasty this thing was. The knobs were almost to the point where you couldn't see the radio was almost smooth, because there was just so much gunk and grime stuck to the knobs. So all of those got dropped in the ultrasonic cleaner. They're nice and clean now. I had to remove the faceplate to get so I could take this top piece off and remove the lens to get in and clean all that gunk out from inside the lens. Now, if you ask, is there anything you can do about that to prevent it from happening again? Yes. Try not to use your radio in a dust storm. It's just a fact of the way this faceplate is designed. There's not a lot you can really do to keep the dirt out. The dirt gets in through the switches here, because these switches go in back behind, and it can get in up, and that's why occasionally you'll see dirt collecting on the top side of this lens, because remember, this lens wraps around to the top side. You'll see dirt collecting on the top side here. That's just dust particles getting down through the tiny little gaps around these buttons and switches here. It also gets in through the inside of the radio. It'll get in around the cutouts where the meters are in here. So you'll see dirt collect, same thing here. And there's not a lot you can do for that, other than, like I say, try to keep the radio in a clean environment. If your house is a mess, eventually you're going to end up with that mess inside, in between the lens and the black in there. If you keep it very clean, you should never have that problem. But yeah, this thing was, you got to look at how old it is, and it's probably the first time it's ever been taken apart to be cleaned. So yeah, it lasted a long time. But yeah, really nice radio. Really the only imperfection is right there. That's about it. That one little tiny nick right there in the faceplate. That's all there is. I mean, it's they really don't get much nicer looking than that. The silk screening on the faceplate's in mint condition. There's nothing rubbed off. There's no other dents or dings. Even the bottom. A lot of times you'll see the two things that get damaged the most are the corners and the bottom. The bottom, because people, even having the base plate having feet on it, still they drag the radio, and there's something underneath of it, and it'll end up dragging across and scratching it. But yeah, just really, really nice. So there you go. There's another GE Super Bass model 3-5875A ready to be put back into service.